Would you like to be somebody who knows what status anxiety is? Then listen to this entire video where I explain where it originates from and also a useful tip you can do to overcome status anxiety, and also actually I think the sort of fundamental reason why it actually exists. So before we get into this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to learn more about self-development, dating, Jungian psychology, and how to reduce suffering in life in general. So let's get into it. So status anxiety is a concept coined by Alain de Botton, who is, I believe he's British and Swiss. He's a philosopher. He created the school of life. So what status anxiety is referring to is the anxiety you get when you compare yourself to others. You compare your achievements, your possessions, your appearance with others. And we either feel anxious because we have less than others, or maybe we feel anxious because somebody around us or the people around us might end up having more than us. They might be becoming better at their job. They'll become more successful than us. And maybe, for example, tangible examples of comparisons would be maybe somebody has a better job than you, they earn more money. Maybe they have a more attractive spouse than you, or they have a juicier bank account. Now, the anxiety is permanent, the status anxiety, because you are always subjected to the risk of potentially losing what you have. Therefore, let's say you perform worse than others, or you obtaining, or the risk that somebody around you ends up with more than you, obtains more possessions, more good looking, more wealth than you, let's say. And status anxiety is obviously always referring to status, so to usually typically material possessions or earthly matter. So things like the way you look, like your face or your body or the car you drive. Now, I have an example of the status anxiety I feel myself. So I just graduated a master's degree in finance and investments, and of course I'm looking for my next step in life, and that would typically be a job. And LinkedIn is it's a nice platform, but it also broadcasts people's achievements, and people around me will start to post the job they got. And of course in finance there are the pinnacles of the, let's say, the holy grails in terms of companies, which is usually like Goldman Sachs or other large firms like BlackRock, JP Morgan, other large institutions. And I feel anxiety that I'm not doing that yet. I don't have that job yet. When I see this girl I interned with at Deutsche Bank, she's doing an asset management analyst program at Goldman Sachs, and I think, wow, that's amazing. Like, I wish I had that, you know. Even though maybe it's probably not the right thing for me, because you get worked pretty tough, you know. You have long working hours at Goldman Sachs, and I'm not a fan of that. But I still compare myself, think like, wow, that's so cool. Like, she's better than me. Like, she worked harder than me, or she's more intelligent than me. She has more than me. That's an example. Now, one of the key questions is, where does the status anxiety come from? Well, if we roll back in time into history, Europe at least was governed by feudalism, which is a sort of societal structure where you have clear class divisions and like let's say aristocrat who owns land and also has slaves who work in the fields and reap the harvests of the land, let's say. Or you have a monarchy where you have, you know, a family which reigns over the country or the state, and you essentially had very rigid social structures, you know, centuries ago. And the key here was that in these social structures, you were not able to move up and down social classes because they were so rigid. If you were born a peasant, you die a peasant. If you were born an aristocrat, you would die an aristocrat. Now, that means you were not ashamed of having less than the aristocrat if you were a peasant, because no one expected you to have any more than that, let's say. And you might have despised your lord for having more than you, but you were not anxious about him having more than you, or you being perceived as less, or let's say as less worthy because you have less money. I mean, you would have been deemed as less worthy, but not because you had not taken the opportunities to become an aristocrat. That just wasn't expected. However, nowadays, in the West, we live in democracies, and the citizens of these democracies are fed the idea that they have equal rights and equal opportunities. Thus, you are able to achieve whatever you want, you are able to have whatever you want, and it is up to your own responsibility to get it, because you have the right and the opportunities. So you feel guilty if you are not reeling in achievements, because it is your fault you are not successful. And this is not quite correct in my eyes, because we do not live in a perfect meritocracy where you would expect people to get adequately rewarded for their skills and their hard work. There is a long list of factors that determine whether you succeed or not that has nothing to do with your merit. For example, your social network, whether you know powerful people, or your inheritance, whether you have access to financial resources, etc. Hence, just because you're skilled and industrious doesn't mean you're going to be wealthy. And we are not really fed this idea that there are powers outside of your control that actually determine your success. We do not really consider often enough that there are these variables, and we just constantly compare ourselves, thinking that our fate lies in our own hands and it's our fault we are not successful yet. Especially self-help gurus really perpetuate this idea, and motivational speakers telling you to work your ass off, But that's that I think they contribute to that conception that your fate lies completely in your hands. Now, the problem, or the trap of this status anxiety, is that the measurement of success is entirely relative. You can be a billionaire and still think you're unsuccessful. You can be a street sweeper, nothing against street sweepers, I'm just using this example now because they on average earn less than a billionaire. You can be a street sweeper and think you're successful. It depends on your expectations with which you choose subjectively. It's really up to you with what you determine and what you benchmark as successful or not successful. Now, the trap of status anxiety is, well, first of all, you choose your expectation, but more importantly, the trap is that when you start to move up in a social hierarchy or any kind of domain, whether it is in your job, like moving up a corporate ladder, moving into a nicer neighborhood, moving from high school to university, the people you compare yourself with change. You choose a new game to play in, and you choose a new set of adversaries in your competition. So no matter how wealthy you become, you will never be at the top of the hierarchy you choose, because when you move up, you will not feel like your original competitors are any longer the competition anymore. They're no longer the people you compete with. Hence, you choose a new game and new competitors. You start comparing yourself to new people who are roughly equal to you, and you will always feel the need to compete no matter what. And this is the thing. As soon as you earn your first million, you'll start comparing yourself to millionaires, not to people working in a normal job, let's say. And that's the psychological thing that you trick yourself into running this. I guess you could compare it to like a treadmill. It's not really the hedonistic treadmill, because that has to do with always wanting more. But in a sense, it is that you always want to compete against the people above you. You compare yourself to those who have more than you, let's say. Or the people who you have something equal with, but as soon as you move up, you compare yourself to people who had more than the people you originally compared yourself with. So you're always competing. The reason why this happened, I'm not quite sure, but I think one reason might be that it's a biological trick that makes you restless and therefore keep you alive. It makes sure you're always working. And if you're always working, the likelihood that you have access to more resources then, and you survive as an individual and your genes survive, is higher. So maybe it's an evolutionary trick to get you just to keep working. Now, I think the antidote to this status anxiety is to try to compare yourself with who you were in the past. People like Jordan Peterson try to promote this idea that comparing yourself to who you were in the past allows you to be conscious and comprehend your own growth and the trajectory you're on. Because if you were somebody who was, let's say, less competent, less pleasant, let's just put it at that, less pleasant in the past, then you'll feel good about yourself. And it's not good to compare yourself to other people in the first place, because there are so many variables and domains that you can that you are playing in life. Like, just because somebody has a better job than you doesn't mean you should compete yourself with them, because maybe they don't have a family, or maybe they do have a family, but it is completely fragmented and full of resentment, whilst you don't have as much of a good job, but you have a loving family and you have your own house. Maybe they don't have their own house, but they have their own, like a better job than you. All these things, like, there's so many variables, like also your mental health. What kind of an attitude you have in life, whether people like you or not, whether, there's so many variables. You really can't compare yourself with somebody on one singular domain. Hence, try to compare yourself with who you were yesterday, and that will enable you to always progress and become a better person, which can also be anxiety provoking, because you'll always want to be better than you were yesterday, but it is I would say a healthier substitute. Now, I suspect that people suffer from status anxiety because they lack something else in life, and which makes them succumb to frivolous worries. I think there is a fundamental need that is not engaged within the modern human, and that makes them fall for other, let's say, belief systems like consumerism, which isn't really a belief system, but it's like a short-term fix, a short-term substitute for the fact that your existence is in question, and you try to drug yourself or sedate yourself with just consuming things which will make you happy in the very short term, or satisfied in the very short term, but not in the long term. But if you keep buying, you can sort of maintain this precarious state of satisfaction. So I think if we try to ask questions about human existence and try to look for answers on like a fundamental existential level, like something that Jordan Peterson really tries to do, then I think we'll be able to maybe move away from status anxiety, which is actually quite, like, in the grand scheme of things, worrying about what your neighbor has in terms of a job and his possessions or her possessions, like, it really is, it's quite frivolous and inconsequential. And there are far greater issues, let's say, in life, I think, that might be more meaningful to engage in. So, in conclusion, status anxiety arises when you always compare yourself to your peers in regards to your possessions, your achievements, and your appearance. And this really comes from the fact that we are fed the idea that we have equal rights and opportunities. So if somebody has more than you, you think that there's something wrong with you, like you're being lazy, you haven't taken up on the opportunities, when really there are so many other factors that are manipulating your degree of success in terms of wealth in life. And I think this happens because it's like a biological trick to keep us surviving and make us successful, or have access to, or seek access to resources which will keep us alive, essentially, and survive. And the key is, I think, a way to overcome status anxiety is to compare yourself to who you were yesterday or in the past, and to realize that you have grown and you should continue growing, because that is what's really valuable, and will also make you a valuable asset to society. And finally, I suspect people succumb to status anxiety because they do not have an existential answer to their life, which, let's say, religion used to offer to society. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to learn more about self-development, dating, Jungian psychology, and how to reduce suffering in life. Please leave a comment below if you'd or leave a comment on whether you've felt status anxiety before, in what terms you have felt status anxiety, like how have you compared yourself to others? Was it at school with grades, your achievements, at your job, whether somebody got a promotion you didn't? Leave a comment below and let me know, and I can discuss it with you. So thank you for listening.